Hi class, welcome to the online session. We are going to talk about muscle histology for this meeting. And this instruction would cover the three muscle types, which would be the skeletal muscle, the cardiac muscle, and the smooth muscle with the following slides. Okay, so now let's start with the skeletal muscle. So before we start with the specifics, I'm going to tell you something about the connective tissues that would be present, okay, in the muscle. When we are talking about the connective tissue that would surround the muscle, the entire muscle, we call it as the epimysium, and this is a dense, irregular connective tissue. When you are talking about the connective tissue that would surround the muscle bundles, this would be called the perimysium. And when we are talking about the uh, the delicate fibers, okay, that would surround each muscle fiber, it would be called the endomysium. The type of fiber that would be present in the endomysium would be what we call as the reticular fiber. So now let's talk about the skeletal muscle. The skeletal muscle is a striated muscle. There are two types of striated muscle. We have the cardiac muscle and then we have the skeletal muscle. So it's very important that in the practical exam, you have to specify your particular answer as either skeletal or cardiac. Again, you have to specify it and do not simply write there, it's a striated muscle. Okay, so with regards to the striated muscle, we would be able to differentiate them by the appearance of the muscle fiber. So here you can see that the muscle fiber would contain several nuclei. And where are they located? They are located at the periphery. So periphery located multiple nuclei, and this would be skeletal muscle. Okay. Aside from that, we won't be able to see this one, but we would know that skeletal muscle is voluntary. So for the striated muscle, this is another slide showing to us the skeletal muscle. This is a cross section. So what it shows to us would be the presence again of muscle fibers that would contain or that would possess multiple peripherally located nuclei. Okay, this is skeletal muscle. Uh, let's look at the tongue so that you would appreciate the striations. So how to identify that this is the tongue slide? We look into the lining epithelium. Okay, it is stratified squamous that is non-keratinized. And then in this particular area, you can see the presence of these projections. Okay, so if you're going to run down your tongue on the surface, you can see that uh, it looks like you have a lot of these projections. These are what we call as the papillae. Okay, and some of them would contain taste buds. Although in this particular area, I do not see the taste buds present. Okay, let's center on what is important in our topic, and this would be the skeletal muscle. So underneath in the stroma, you would see the presence of this circular pattern. Okay, and then you have the longitudinal pattern. So where would we be able to see the striations? So we would see the striations in the longitudinal section. Okay, so the cross striations here would be composed of dark bands and I bands, and we call them as A band for the dark and I band for the light. And the dark band would be bisected in the middle, although we do not see it here because it's very small. We would only be able to see it through electron microscopy. So again, the dark band would be bisected further by the M line, and the I band, which is the light band, would be bisected further by the Z line. Okay, so if you're going to look at this, the cross section, skeletal muscle, you can see the presence of smaller, okay, structures, which we would call as the myofibrils. Okay, so you can see the presence of smaller structures, which we would call as myofibrils. And myofibrils would be seen in other muscle groups, in the smooth as well as in the cardiac muscle. So the myofibrils would be composed of several filaments, like the ones that we have here, and the filaments would be either they are thick or thin. The thick would be the myosin, the thin would be called the actin, and the sarcomere is present, okay, in these myofibrils, and the functional unit of the myofibril would be called the sarcomere, which would possess the myosin and actin. So the sarcomere would start from one Z line to the next, which would mean, because the Z line would bisect the I line, so it would cover both the actin and the myosin component. Okay, so see, you can see a lot of those longitudinal sections, okay, or longitudinal appearing skeletal muscle fibers with those cross striations. Okay. And then our last slide for skeletal muscle would be the esophagus upper region. How do we know that this is from the esophagus? Because the tongue and the esophagus would contain this the lining epithelium, which is stratified squamous epithelium, uh, in the esophagus. Because it's part of the GI tract, it would be further subdivided into several layers. We have the mucosa. This would be the lamina propria of the mucosa. This would be the muscularis mucosa of the mucosa. And then underneath the muscularis mucosa, this would be the submucosa possessing the esophageal glands. And then this would be the muscularis propria, which would contain the muscle fibers. And then the outermost portion would contain the fibroadipose tissue. This would be called the adventitia. So the this muscularis propria is the one that we need to look at. So you can see the presence of skeletal muscle fibers. And skeletal muscle fibers would be present in the upper region of the esophagus. So this is the slide for the upper region. The middle portion of the esophagus would be of a mixed type, wherein in the muscularis propria, you would see both the skeletal and the smooth. But on the lower region, you have the smooth muscle fibers. So again, you would be able to appreciate that this would be the skeletal muscle by the presence of the cross striations, as well as the presence of the peripherally located nuclei. Okay, so we are through with the skeletal muscle. We go with the cardiac muscle. So I will only show you the slide for the cardiac muscle possessing the Purkinje fiber. So I'm going to show you the entire slide for the cardiac muscle. You can see the presence of those striations, those connective tissue, which we would call as the perimysium and the mysium. Okay, there. So how would we be able to identify for the cardiac muscle versus the the skeletal muscle? Both are striated. So aside from knowing that these are involuntary muscles, so we would be able to see the presence of the location of the nucleus. Where would it be located? it would be centrally placed and it is single. Okay. Okay. And then another thing is the presence of striations. So striations would be a feature for cardiac muscle. Another feature would be the presence of the branching appearance. So here you would see the branching appearance the of the cardiac muscle. So again, single layer, a single nucleus, centrally placed, presence of striations, branching appearance of the nuclei of the cells. And another thing that we can see uh, in the cardiac muscle would be the presence of intercalated discs. So intercalated discs would serve as the attachment site between muscle fibers. So this is an example of the intercalated disc. Another one, another one. Okay, so this is actually a linear, densely stained linear structure, okay, that would serve as the attachment site. And then you have the striations. There you have the striations. For the contractile filaments, they're the same as that of the skeletal muscle because of the presence of cross striations. So they also have the A band and I band. Okay, dark band A, light band I. And we also have another specialized structure, okay, located in this portion there. So uh, this is a specialized cardiac muscle that would be used for for transmitting impulses to various myocytes so that they would contract in a precise fashion. Okay? These are what we call as the Purkinje fibers, centrally placed nucleus, single, and then you have abundant nuclei. So it's where is it located? Okay, it's in the endocardium, subendocardium portion. There, subendocardium portion. Okay, so our last muscle type would be, where is it? Wait, it would be the smooth muscle. Okay. So the smooth muscle, what are the features of the smooth muscle? First of all, it is involuntary. Next, it does not have cross striations. And third, the nucleus would be centrally placed and it is single. Okay, so now we go to the specifics of the slide. So this is the urinary bladder. The urinary bladder is identified by having a lining epithelium, which we would call as the transitional epithelium, characterized by a multi-layering of the transitional cells. And the transitional cells would be identified by having similar polygonal cells around nuclei from the basal portion to the surface. Okay, so now we go to the layers. For the layers of the urinary bladder, it still would possess the lamina propria, and then you have the submucosal portion. This would be the muscularis propria. You can see the presence of those smooth muscle fibers there. Okay, so the smooth muscle fibers here would be centrally placed. They are composed of, these are fusiform cells. They do not possess the cross striations. So it's very important for you to be able to identify the muscle types based on the location of the nucleus, the presence or absence of cross striations, and whether or not the nuclei are multiple or single. Okay, so this would be single, centrally placed, absence of cross striations. This is smooth muscle. Take note that the smooth muscle fibers would still possess contractile apparatus composed of the thick and thin filaments. Okay. Then we have the uterus over here. So the uterus is Coming from the female genital tract, and to be able to identify it, we first look at the layers, which the innermost layer would be called the endometrium. It possesses these glands. Okay, those are the glands. And then in the myometrium, the second layer, you can see the presence of the smooth muscle fibers seen in alternating fascicles. Okay, that would be circular, longitudinal. So here you would see the presence of those fusiform cells, elongated nuclei, again centrally placed, and you do not see the cross striations. So this is found in the uterus. Okay, and then lastly would be the jejunum. The jejunum is the middle portion or the second portion of the small intestine, and it is known by the presence, when we are talking about small intestine, it is known by the presence of villus projections. So these are the villus projections that would be composed of the lining epithelium, simple columnar epithelium, and then you have the lamina propria. And there's a bigger uh, projection present here in the jejunum, which we would call as the plicae circularis. So this would be an example of the plicae circularis, which contains the villi consisting of the mucosa, and then you have the inner portion, which would be the submucosa. So this is the plicae circularis. Okay, that is for identification of the slide type. The muscle, the smooth muscle, would be located in this, sorry, yeah, this portion. Okay, there. So this would be the location of the smooth muscle. So I have difficulty in focusing this one. Okay, so this is seen in a circular pattern. This would be the longitudinal pattern. So it's similar to the smooth muscle that we saw in the uterus as well as in the urinary bladder. Okay, they have elongated nuclei. Okay, these are cells that do not have cross striations. Okay, so this is smooth muscle for the jejunum. Okay, so those are the slides that we have for the muscle histology. I hope you have learned something for this session. So thank you and good day.